I'm Neal Horen, a child psychologist and director of early childhood at the Georgetown Center for Child and Human Development. I oversee national centers that work on training, technical assistance, research, and evaluation, all centered on early childhood mental health and early childhood systems. And since Hurricane Katrina, I spent a tremendous amount of time developing expertise after disasters: hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, fires, and now the pandemic. One of the things that we've learned from disasters, particularly in my role as the lead for mental health for the Office of Head Start's disaster recovery team, is that the focus is often on the immediate needs in the hierarchy: food, shelter, clothing. And mental health is quite low on that list for both children and adults. I think we need to do three things, and yet we don't. First, we have to prepare for disasters. We don't always know when they'll come, but we do know that there'll be hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, etc. What's most valuable in designing social-emotional supports geared towards the specifics of disasters, that is, anticipating how staff, children, and families will be impacted, is to be thoughtful about social-emotional development. Helping children with the trauma in recovery is going to vary by disaster, but it's always part of the planning. Second, we need to have a plan in place so that supports are developed sooner, not after the basic needs are taken care of, but alongside them, so problems don't become so acute. For example, we oftentimes see emotional issues emerge months later, a child wetting the bed 3 months after the hurricane has passed. The child who's having difficulty each night falling asleep because they've been couch surfing and he can't find his favorite blanket. But we don't train adults to notice those subtle emotional signs that are indicative that something's wrong and that something is amiss with the child's sense of routine. Having plans in place prevents a lot of the running around after the disaster in terms of addressing social-emotional development. Third is the most needed support, which is mental health consultation, not acute care and therapy. And while there's certainly a need for treatment for some, for the majority, it's right in the moment appropriate supports, practical tools that are appropriate for the situation, and how we support children right after a storm, right when they return to their school. And lastly, we need to be aware of and support adults as well as children. 18 months out after a disaster, it's often the parents and caregivers who get stressed. They've been pushing through for 18 months, not really attending to their own mental health needs. In this pandemic, we're talking about educators wearing masks and face shields. We're not really preparing educators for how to ease the stress of a child who's interacting with a teacher who looks like a surgeon. We need to think of mental health as a form of PPE for children and the adults who care for them. Disaster or no disaster, the issue is that we aren't giving communities or adults the practical tools that they need to intervene and help children with their social-emotional development. And now, with a national disaster right in front of us, our adults aren't ready to care for their own mental health, let alone then support those young children in their care. And that's why I'm advocating for the development of a national certification program for infant and early childhood mental health consultants to teach those skills and their application in the appropriate context, whether it's a preschool classroom in normal times or one coping with a pandemic. We're in a future disaster where we need pediatricians to be aware of the social-emotional needs of children. This certificate program can push early childhood systems to not only be better prepared in emergency preparation, response, and recovery, but more importantly, meet the needs of all children and families on an ongoing basis. And this extends to other parts of our early childhood system, supporting primary care physicians who are often the de facto mental health system in much of this country, supporting home visitors, child welfare workers, and others in the early childhood system to be better able to support social-emotional development. After having worked with every state, every territory, numerous tribal nations, as well as countries in Latin America and the Middle East, it's never been more clear than during this pandemic that mental health consultation has to become a clearly embedded aspect of all early childhood systems.